What up, what up, what up? It's your boy Jay Crawford back at you with another edition of Excuse My Bias, the Bias Sports Podcast Show, the one and only, which is not the one and only because we all have biases. We just have different biases. Want to welcome everybody back. Thanks so much for everybody for checking out the previous episodes of the podcast. We're growing so great, man. I love you guys there. I know excuse me. Said I was going to get back to you guys pretty soon there. Sorry to keep you guys waiting a couple of days, but a lot of NBA news to cover today. Of course, we're going to still be sticking with NBA. Maybe cover some boxing on another episode because I really want to dive into. I saw Manny Pacquiao come on Undisputed today with Skip and Shannon talking about his upcoming fight with Hugh Thurman. And still, Skip boosted him up about him beating Floyd a couple years back, which was just a bad fight in general, and he still didn't win it. So we may do some boxing in some future episodes. I want to stick with NBA on today's episode here. Just a rundown. We're going to go over, of course, the Game 4. I was about to say Game 3. Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals there, with Toronto tying up the series here. You guys know I've been saying Milwaukee is a juggernaut, and I said from the beginning I thought this series may go 6 out of respect for Kawhi, but I was tempted to say 5. I might be right on track there with the 6. We're going to go ahead into that a little bit more and see if Milwaukee is still the favorites to come out of the East, or has people's opinions changed and moved into Toronto. Also going to cover a topic I saw on not Undisputed, First Things First with Nick Wright and Chris Carter. Is Steph Curry a top 5 point guard of all time? I'm going to give you my answer and my top 5 coming up very soon. And I think that will cover probably most of everything that we do here today. I might go off into some other side topics there, particularly with Kevin Durant, with the upper management for the Golden State Warriors stating that he would be back for the finals already. And also in the same presser, they were saying that they were confident that they were going to re-sign KD. Kind of going to give my thoughts on that as well. But we're going to start today, of course, with Game 4. Big win for Toronto there. It really, that's what said. That was going to be the game. I already picked Game 3 for them to win regardless. Just with that being their first home game back, I just knew they would probably get a hold of that one there. But the way that they went about it was very different from what I expected. When I first had made that proclamation that the Toronto Raptors would go ahead and take it to 6, I really was thinking Kawhi's going to be putting these guys on his back, and he's just really going to just will this thing to victory here twice. And I thought maybe he will will one of them for sure, and maybe the other he will will about halfway through, and then somebody else would pick up there with it. Yesterday, they really carried Kawhi, which is big, because I still don't think we have had that Kawhi game where he carries his team through, which could be big for Toronto moving forward, because if they get that game, despite even if they lose Game 5, if that game comes in Game 6 where he carries them through, then you got a Game 7 if anything can happen. I'm still sticking with my prediction of the of 6 games for Milwaukee. I'm just really tickled with so many of these shows, and I get it. You know, you got to sell ratings, you got to sell things, you got to get the eyeballs on you, so you got to make hot takes all the time. And it's just a little funny to me how everybody kind of just like, oh, let's jump off of Milwaukee now. Let's move on to Toronto, because Toronto, you know, they came home and held serve, and now Milwaukee looks a little shaky. I I ain't so sure about that. For me, Milwaukee really played one. This has been their first bad game of the playoffs. And well, not their first, excuse me, their second, because that first game against Boston and game one was the bad game. So this will probably be their second bad game of the playoffs. And like, to me, that's par for the course. I mean, the best teams in the league, best team in league history. I mean, the 72-win Bulls had bad games too. They lost back-to-back games to Seattle in the championship game where Mike shot like 30% from the field when they put GP on him finally. And, you know, they had some bad performances. Even the game 6 that they won was a bad performance. Seattle just played just as bad. Sam Perkins went like 0 for 1,000 from 3 and blew that game for them. But that's just a way to scale how good teams can have bad games there. That's what people call the greatest team ever. And you see how bad they played in the NBA Finals. You know, it happens. The 73-9 Warriors team, same thing. They were down 3-1 to OKC. So it happens there. They had a bad game against Detroit. That was a bad game yesterday. They really just got manhandled on the boards. Not so much with the numbers, but it was just the timely things with it. Serge himself had 4 offensive rebounds off the bench. That's just ridiculous there. With, you know, that he played his best game of the series by far, hitting open shots. I mean, he was taking down rebounds, dunking it back on people. We haven't seen that Serge in, you know, God knows how long. So Toronto really had everything cooking. Hey, Kyle Lowry, you know, he's winning some people back over in these conference finals. Everybody kind of gets so Kyle because he has these wildly disappearing, wildly inconsistent and big disappearing acts where he'll just not get any damn thing. But in this series, he's been pretty good, pretty consistent. Even in his even in game 2, you know, he came back down to 15 points, but that still was, you know, still like I said, he's in that range of player where he can get you 30 in one game and get you 15 in the next and average out in that 22 range. So he's in that range of player. He had another great game yesterday. What really killed Milwaukee was the bench. You know, Norman Powell, Van Fleet, and Ibaka. You know, those guys coming off the bench alone, nobody else scoring. Those 3 alone got 48 points off the bench. Milwaukee's, you know, whole bench mob of, you know, Brogdon, Connaughton, you know, all those guys, Ilyasova, only got 21 points. It was just, they just couldn't hit anything. Brogdon in particular, he was 2 for 11. You know, that's not Brog. Everybody knows he was Rookie of the Year last year. He's one of their most consistent players. He's a 50, 40, 90 guy. You know, he shoots 50% from the field, 40% from 3, 90% from the free throw line. And he was just horrible. He missed all 3 of his 3-point attempts. And he missed so many layups and just bunnies right at the basket. Like, he missed a bunch of floaters, and he does his little Steve Nash imitation when he drives underneath the basket and tries to flip it up on the other side. He was just missing a lot of shots that he normally makes. He was 2 of 11. You know, if he just makes his normal 50% there, that can make a big swing in the game there, along with them not getting killed on the glass. But they also got killed on 3-point line, and that's just something that you just didn't expect from the Milwaukee Bucks versus Toronto. You know, Milwaukee is known as a 3-point shooting team. You know, you put Giannis out there with 4 shooters, and you basically just make the defense make a decision. You're either going to build a wall and keep Giannis out, or you're just going to let him pick you apart and throw it out for open threes. They just couldn't hit anything yesterday. You know, Toronto outshot them from 3-point land by, I think it was 14-11. Neither one of them shot at a hugely, you know, efficient clip, but those, you know, that extra 3-pointers that Toronto made, plus the offensive rebounding that they did, plus just the overall bad shooting from from Milwaukee, and then the free throw line. I mean, Giannis, goddamn, man, what the hell is going on with your ass? I don't know if Drake is really getting to you or whatever, but goddamn, you know, airballing shit from damn free throw line. This is the second game in a row. I give you the pass on one, but goddamn, brother, you can't keep doing that. But yeah, I mean, it was just a bad game for them. That's why I say it's just funny to me that everybody jumps off of that. Really quickly, since I did bring up Drake, I did just see the presser where Mike Budenholzer was like, hey, Fans, it should be a line. That's why they have lines on the court for reasons. Fans supposed to stay back a certain place. He said Draco, whatever he is to Toronto, shouldn't be that close to the action and involved with it. I just thought that was just funny, man, because I believe, as I told everybody, I believe Coach Budenholzer is the coach of the year. But I think it's just funny that Drake is getting under his skin. And I don't know who was going to benefit, honestly. I don't know who was going to benefit. Maybe it's going to benefit Toronto because Budenholzer is too concerned with Drake on the sideline. I don't think that's the case. Obviously, they're going back home to Milwaukee anyway. But maybe it's gamesmanship. This was the other part I was thinking. Maybe it's gamesmanship from Budenholzer to point out Drake and maybe see if Drake goes over the line next time. And maybe he goes a little too far. And maybe that throws off Toronto and it, causes too much of a stir because, he was shouting out that Drake shouldn't be that involved in it. Maybe he tries to prove a point and go a little too far and sheer a little too hard next time. Maybe that riles up his team there. So, like I said, it could go either way there with it. But back to the original point, like I said, I'm not jumping off Milwaukee at all. I still think they're juggernaut. They just had a bad game. If you really think about game 3, if Giannis doesn't get that bad charge call, which I thought that was bullshit, because he looked like he was clearly there, took the charge squarely in the chest. If he doesn't get that charge call, that's early in the second overtime. That's in the first 30 seconds of the second overtime. If he doesn't get that game maybe doesn't go to Toronto because Kawhi went on to score 8 points in the second overtime to kind of clinch that. But if Giannis is in the game that entire time, he might not get that. As you see, when Kawhi had a chance to win in regulation, or maybe that was the end of overtime, Brogdon was bracketing him, basically forcing him one way, and Giannis was to help. And when he made that move to his left, Giannis just, just ran right over there, contested the hell out the shot where it barely caught rim, when Kawhi put it up. So you got to think if Giannis is playing that type of defense for an entire second overtime, maybe that game goes a different way. So then game 4, well, Lowry and Ibaka and Norman Powell and Van Fleet, all those guys had their, career games. That doesn't matter. You're still down 3-1. They might not even have that game because maybe they're down spiritually. They're down 3-0 at that point. So, that's just how quickly things can hinge on, and flip-flop there. I feel like Milwaukee, once they get back home, they're going to get some of those beneficial calls, that home cooking. Their three-point shooters are going to be on because they really haven't been on all series, if you really look at it. Even game 1, when they won, and even game 2, they really weren't on from three-point land. Yet game 2, they really killed them on the glass. A lot of those rebounds, tip-ins, they're with it. And game 1 was really just one guy. That really was just Brook Lopez, who was just hot. They still haven't had a collective game where everybody's going. I feel like Milwaukee can get that in game 5 and turn right around and flip that on game 6 there for them and be in the finals there. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm still going with there. I still just think Milwaukee is still just built very well, for the playoffs in general. Like I said, Toronto is really just kind of playing their best ball collectively as a group all season. And that's kind of a good thing. In the Philly series, nobody from Toronto wanted to shoot. Lowry didn't want to shoot. Siakam didn't want to shoot. Gasol didn't. None of these guys wanted to touch the ball. So they just force-fed Kawhi. He had to shoot 40 fucking times. There's now, I don't know if maybe Kawhi had to say something or the coaching staff, everybody else had to get them together and say, hey, you guys are going to have to step up. But these guys have really proven themselves and stepped up to the plate. But I still believe in Milwaukee's others, as Shaq would put it, as more reliable than Toronto's. Like Eric Bledsoe's not going to be shooting 20% the whole damn series. I don't believe anyway. Especially after he just got awarded All NBA first team there with that. I believe he's going to have one of those good games at least. He only needs one. I don't think he needs a bunch. He's needed more so for his defense there and to keep Kyle Lowry in check, which is with him being announced as an all defensive first teamer. He damn sure need to get that in place because Kyle Lowry shouldn't be dominating him. Well, he's not dominating him, but he's definitely outplaying him. He shouldn't be outplaying him this damn easily when you're a damn first team all defensive guy. So I think he's going to kind of switch that up, and then I think that will boost up his scoring eventually too. Brogdon, I definitely don't expect to go 2 for 11 anymore. Ilyasova, he's going to play better. Mirotic played good. Chris Middleton is balling, and that's the other thing that's really keep me interested and encouraged about Milwaukee, because even when they try to build the wall for Giannis, which they always do, to try to take away that primary option of just having him drive and either draw the defense out and kick. When everything kind of breaks down, Middleton has showed a great ability in the half court to just get a mid-range shot, to just get an up fake, get a guy in the air, either throw, jump it to him, get to the free throw line, just get 1-2 dribbles, pull up. You forget how long this guy is. Like, he's about 6'8", 6'9", shoots over top of his head. So he can get a shot off a lot of times pretty easily there. So that's encouraging there, not just for this round, but possibly they go over to the finals. That if you get a guy like that, then you're going to need a bucket in a tight situation, and you can't depend on Giannis just going downhill because they're trapping him. That bids very well for Milwaukee going forward there. Then, like I said, if you get to the finals there, they're definitely going to need Bledsoe to get it together much more, especially on the offensive end. Defensively, I think he'll be fine regardless, but offensively, I think he's definitely going to have to get it going. But I think if they get just, not to look forward too much, just say that this series is over, but just projecting to the Warriors series, if they get there for a second, Clay, depending on who Milwaukee starts there, Clay may, I don't know, Clay wouldn't get Bledsoe, I'm believing. He wouldn't get Bledsoe with that. So that would leave Steph having to guard Bledsoe, and, Bledsoe having Steph on him, he's going to have a matchup he can really kind of go at and exploit, especially if they play this big lineup with Middleton at the 2, Giannis and Mirotic and Lopez up front. I'm not quite sure if they're going to go there. It depends, especially if KD comes back. That's really going to be something. That's why I was talking with some guys earlier. This rest for the Warriors might be, it could end up being a negative. And if you could follow me for a little bit, it could kind of end up being a negative because they could get so much rest that they're going to be almost forced and inclined to say, okay, now we got to play KD. We might even have to play Boogie because he's good now, because we can't justify saying, okay, now just sit out and watch because you're healthy now. And you had damn near 2 weeks between series. So now that can kind of, like, you know what I'm saying? Now trying to throw all of that back into game 1 next Thursday with, a Toronto team or a Milwaukee team who I'm predicting coming in steamroller. They don't have to adjust to nobody coming back in. That could be something that could ultimately hurt Golden State, because when you bring KD back into that mix, you got to depend on him now. Now you got to feed him to get him 30, because you can't really move. You can't change everything to say we're going to move everything around to put KD in the lineup again, and then just say we're just going to use him as a role player or as a spot up guy. That's just not going to work. You can use him, obviously, kind of like Harrison Barnes did, of course, but just, he would just be shooting the ball more and at a higher clip. But at the same token, with him being an all-NBA guy, you got to serve a certain reference to him, which means Draymond playing like an all-NBA guy now, playing like the Hall of Famer he is, he ain't going to be that guy. And then you got to think about, too, KD with his calf. Is he going to be able to keep up with the pace that Golden State was playing previously? Draymond was taking that thing and hauling ass. I ain't never seen Draymond play that fast before. Draymond was taking that thing off the board and hauling ass up the court. If KD's calf is really, even if it's good, you don't know, if he's going to be able to still be back to 100%. Now, I figure he will, and most people will figure that, but you just never know. You got to push off a lot to run up down the court that much. You springing off it to jump in the air. It can get tender, and maybe that goes, goes back wary, and that can just kind of mess up some things. Boogie, he can't run anyway. Even if he was healthy, he's not going to fit with that pace. So that's why I said this rest could actually do more harm than good for Golden State, because they might feel more inclined to have to play these guys. They're 2 free agents. in the finals, because I don't know how you talk to them where they're saying, hey, coach, I'm ready, I'm healthy. And Kerr got to say, well, no, we're going to play without you because we don't want to mess up the rhythm. I don't know how that goes over, especially when he's about to go into free agency now. And as much as KD's been on goddamn social media going back at Chris Broussard and all that shit, talking about Chris Broussard doesn't have his number, cap. And it's like, damn, KD, you should have known he probably was talking about social media too, like DM and all that. I don't think Chris Broussard will come on national TV and just completely lie about communicating with you. I just thought that was a little petty. But yeah, I think that could end up being kind of a negative for Golden State there for it. It could benefit Toronto or Milwaukee, who I'm picking to go there. But either way with that, I think, it'll be an interesting series there with it. Interested to see how tomorrow's game is going to go Milwaukee. I'm picking Milwaukee to go and get that one there at home. I think everybody's kind of going to pick that with them coming off those bad losses and getting that home cooking there. But to capitalize on that or to further expound upon that, I'm thinking they're going to go ahead and finish it off Saturday, though, in Toronto, too. I think they'll win them back-to-back and go ahead and get them up out of there. Let me jump into the KD thing real quick, since we're already kind of on Golden State before I get into the Steph Curry as a top 5 guy. They did say, the Warriors front office, that they felt confident that they were going to re-sign KD. Man, with that, I think so much is dependent upon how this last week of the season go, how these finals go. Because, say, for example, Steve Kerr does make that tough decision I just spoke about. And he says, hey, you know what, Kevin? You're the best in the world. We know that you're the best. We're way better with you. But you say, you know what? Because we got to change so much, and you're not all the way there. And your conditioning is not there either, because you can't run, obviously, because of your calf. We're going to go ahead and get started without you. If we get to the point where it's a tied series at 2-2, something like that, then we'll look at bringing you back. Maybe Kerr has to make that decision, do something like that. I think it's a long shot. I think they're going to end up playing him from game 1. But let's just say he does do that. I don't know how KD returns at that point then. And KD's a guy, he's a smart guy anyway, and he knows basketball history, which baffles me a little bit more of why he thought he could skip the line by joining the Golden State Warriors, help him get a ring, and think that he was going to be looked at with all this admiration of being on the same level as these other all-time greats, like Kobe and LeBron and Joe. I don't know, him being a basketball historian, that part of it didn't click to me of why he thought he would be able to skip the line like that and be looked at in the same limelight as those other guys. But I think he may have learned from that, obviously, there. And, Chris Broussard has also reported that he's talked to other NBA players currently, like in the last few weeks, and have spoken with them. And they've told him that KD is recruiting guys now, today, to come to New York behind closed doors. So, a lot of this stuff I don't believe is coming out of thin air. Like that's a whole lot of stuff to say that's coming out of thin air. And KD moved all of his businesses from the Bay Area to New York, or the main ones anyway. I'm not going to say all of them, but he moved a good portion of them to New York already. And for somebody who's not going to play in New York, I don't know what benefit you have of moving your companies to New York, especially when we're in a global commerce, state right now where you can kind of run your business anywhere. So if you're going to move it to somewhere, it usually probably be closer so you could actually be there in person. That's just me putting 2 to 2 together, trying to use some basic logic. So I'm thinking that there is a lot of credence to that there. It was something interesting today that I saw. Spencer Dinwiddie put up a tweet saying that, hey, don't forget about Brooklyn. Like, Kyrie and KD might come to us and we'll be the best team in the league. And goddamn if they will be. Because I love that Brooklyn Nets team. I love 2 of my favorite 5 players to watch in the league. Not best players, but just favorite players to watch. Was Spencer Dinwiddie and Karis fucking LeVert. That's my guy right there. I love that team, man. D'Angelo's balling. Spencer Dinwiddie is my guy. I love the way he comes off the bench with that just swagger right there. And I think Karis LeVert is the best kept secret in the league right there, man. If he didn't get hurt and fuck up his ankle, he would have been an all-star this year instead of D'Angelo, because he was the primary scorer. He was the primary player on that team before he got hurt. D'Angelo took over after that point and kind of spread itself out. Then when cats looked up, they said, well, damn, Brooklyn record is pretty good. Who's the leading scorer? It got to be D'Angelo who's carrying that. But actually, it was Karis LeVert before then who was doing all that work. So I say all that to say, damn, if you can put KD with that, Kyrie, I don't know how Kyrie fit, honestly, with D'Angelo, Spencer, and Kyrie. That's a whole lot in the back. That's a whole lot of fucking dribbling. I don't know how that would fit, but goddamn, if you could put KD with it, because you could move KD to the 4 with Karis LeVert at the 3, and then you got D'Angelo, and you can bring in Spencer Dinwiddie at the 1. I think sometimes they play D'Angelo and Karis in the backcourt together, and that's when they would play Jared Dudley in the lineup sometimes. But I just think you got some great lineup options you could do there, bring KD there. And to me, that's damn near a better situation than New York, because New York, even if they get KD and Kyrie, you still got a lot of young guys that you got to fill out the roster with. You still probably be looking at trading that pick to try to get AD. That I still think, New York can put together the best package for it. Unless some other teams get involved. They did make some news about Chicago wanting Lonzo Ball to pair him with Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen there in Chicago, and doing a three-team trade with LA and the Pelicans to get that whole thing going. So that was something interesting that came up. But I think just straight up, just a 2-team deal, New York has the best package, even better than Boston. I don't know why people keep thinking Boston in there. They're not going to trade Tatum or any of those guys, especially when Kyrie doesn't sign back with them. So I don't know where the hell Boston keeps coming up with that. But yeah, if he can go to New York, they're going to have to figure out something. Maybe they get that trade for AD. Maybe that doesn't happen. If that doesn't happen, now you're looking at who? RJ Barrett with the 3rd pick. There's a couple other guys. Culver, they was talking about maybe going with. But either way, you're going to be filling out the rest of that roster with a lot of young guys. With a lot of young guys. And I don't know if even a KD and Kyrie led team and a bunch of young guys, I don't know if that gets you there just yet. Those two are going to ball for sure. But I don't know if that, with, no veteran leadership, no real shooting, but, there's no knockdown shooters on that team. Well, I don't know if that works there. I feel like Brooklyn would be way better, because D'Angelo can be a knockdown shooter. Karis LeVert can be a knockdown shooter. You got Spencer Dinwiddie coming off the bench already. You already got Curricks and Ed Davis. Man, it's a lot of pieces in that goddamn Brooklyn Nets team already, that you put him into that lineup now. That's already a proven playoff team from this year. Now you're talking about some shit that you can get some shit done with. So I think KD definitely got some options, especially back east. I feel like, the front office of the Warriors said what they had to say. Yeah, we feel confident in keeping them, because they don't know. What else the hell can they say? They got to say something to encourage their fan base, and just to, they got to save face. They're still in the middle of the damn playoffs. They can't just say, oh, we know he gone, we're going to focus without him. And he got to stay in the damn locker room for another 3 weeks. So, I think they just said what they had to say there. I'm just so excited for July 1st once we can kind of start seeing what some of these dominoes fall with this free agency here or there. Going to jump into this last topic here for the day with Steph Curry. This is what we were talking about earlier, where I got this one from First Things First with Nick Wright and Chris Carter. And Nick Wright did his top 5 point guards of all time list. And I don't disagree with a lot of it. A lot of it, really the majority of it, I have exactly the same. Maybe move some people here and there. His list was basically Magic at number 1, Oscar Robertson at number 2, Steph Curry at number 3, Zeke Isaiah Thomas at 4, and John Stockton at 5. For me, my list is very similar for the most part. I also have Magic number 1 as the all-time best point guard. I have Oscar number 2 because I feel Oscar always kind of gets left out these conversations because he played in the 60s into the 70s. And, and we do a real disservice to our pioneers because we will say, well, the game has evolved so much more that we can't count their accomplishments anymore. But I always like to counter to say, well, how hard is it to be the first to do anything? You know what I'm saying? How hard was it for the first motherfucker to fly the goddamn airplane? I'm sure the person who had to fly airplane, the first person that had to fly an airplane, has more piloting skills inherently than a pilot now. Now, granted, a pilot now will probably be better than them, but that's because they got so much research to learn from. So you have to think of that person who was the pioneer. If they would have had the same amount of research and information to learn from, how much better would they have been as a pilot? That's my same argument there. If you're following that logic there, for why Oscar Robertson is incorrectly held too low on the all-time list for me there. So I'm definitely with Nick right there, getting him at number 2. I also have Steph at number 3. I also have Zeke, Isaiah Thomas at number 4. Where we differ at is number 5. I have Gary Payton at number 5. And I know a lot of people are like, well, damn, that's kind of high. Like, he skipped over Stockton and Nash and Jason Kidd, all these other guys. How the hell you got Gary Payton so high? And I'll explain myself. For me, Gary Payton is a little bit ahead of Stockton, a very, very little bit ahead of Jason Kidd, not by much at all. And I have him ahead of Nash a little bit as well. And it's more so because I'm an impact guy as well as a skill guy. I'm not a guy who looks at, okay, there's 5 skills for a point guard and this person has to check off every box. I don't go by that. I go by impact for what I see on the game, how they affect the game as well, and affect wins and losses. And then I will look at skills as a tiebreaker, so to speak, with it. For me, John Stockton at number 5, I got no problem with John Stockton number 5 if you got him. I just disagree. I will put Gary Payton there. For me, John Stockton, a lot of times he's put in that echelon because of his stats. He's all-time leading assist guy, all-time steals guy, leads the NBA in all-time in both categories. And because, guys my age, we got to see John Stockton in the NBA Finals as children. So that kind of ring them. I'm at, like, we saw Gary Payton as well, but we saw Stockton in back-to-back. So I think that kind of rings in people's minds there. And say, well, Stockton has to be there over, Gary Payton. But what I counter with that is Gary Payton never had a player the caliber of Karl Malone on his team. And that's even Sean Kemp in his prime. It's not even close. Sean Kemp in his prime and Karl Malone are completely different levels. Karl Malone's a first teamer. Sean Kemp was maybe a second teamer, third teamer there. Consistently, Sean Kemp might have had 1 year when he sticks into the first team, but Karl Malone, for consistently his career, he's going to be that first team guy. Karl Malone, for his entire career, ever since, well, I would say it this way, Karl Malone in his second year in the league, he averaged 20 points a game, 21 to be exact. By his third season in the league, he was averaging damn near 30. 30 is his third season in the league. This is before all that Stockton shit really popped off like that. This is just him on his own, really. So, Karl Malone was getting it early. Gary Payton really only had Sean Kemp for his prime for about 5 seasons. From the 92 to 93 season through the 96 to 97 season. And even in those, Sean Kemp's season high or points, highest points per game during that entire span was only 19 points. I mean, Karl Malone was out giving motherfuckers 30 and 31 with Stockton. That ain't all off Stockton assists. You know what I'm saying? That's not all on Stockton's assists. And it also is a mental aspect of the game, the mental focus of the game. As you saw Shawn Kemp, when he went to, when he went to Cleveland, he just lost all self goddamn control. He got fat and shit. He had one good, year where he averaged 21, which was the first time he averaged 20 in his career. Then the lockout happened. He got fat as hell. He couldn't get back. He was it was rumors of drugs, all this other shit. So Gary Payton had to really keep this guy in line that whole time. I'm not saying that he had to babysit him or anything like that, but Gary Payton really kept him in line and kept him on that right path while he was there in Seattle. And just to think, if he would have had a guy who was a machine, basically, like Karl Malone was just like a fucking machine. He was rock, you know what I'm saying? Just biggest, strongest dude in the lane. One of the fastest runner from baseline to baseline. Could finish over anybody there. Y'all, he wasn't a great defender, but damn, in that era, you could be physical. So he was a hell of a physical defender there. And he could just read and react to the offenses so much better that it wasn't just Stockton just ordering him around. He knew when to fade. He knew when to drive. He knew how to angle certain picks and do certain things like that. Whereas Kemp was really doing a lot of shit just on pure athleticism, just running up and down the court with GP, and GP just throwing them jumps from half court, just making those making them Sports Center highlights like that. But I always thought in my head, hey, if GP would have had an all-time guy like a Charles Barkley, like a Duncan, like a Karl Malone, he would have been put up them same numbers as fucking Johnson. Like, think about that. GP went to the NBA Finals in 96, played the 72-10 Bulls with Shawn Kemp, Sam Perkins, Deadlift Shrimp, and Hershey Hawkins. None of those guys are in the Hall of Fame, by the way. GP's the only one. Think about if GP could have just swapped out Shawn Kemp for Tim Duncan. Goddamn. Now it's a whole you don't even know if Chicago wins the series anymore at that point, because now you get an all-time Hall of Fame point guard with an all-time Hall of Fame power forward or center, big, or whoever you want to put there. I feel like if GP would have had those same teammates, because Stockton and Malone were tied at the hip their entire career. So those numbers that he got, those, you have to really look at those with a certain eye to understand that he had so much help from having that Hall of Fame guy to finish your plays that other point guards didn't have. Jason Kidd didn't have it as well. Jason Kidd had really made a lot of guys better. Kenyon Martin was, way better with Jason Kidd. You saw what Richard Jefferson was. Those guys fell off the map without Jason Kidd. When they were with Jason Kidd, they were going to Eastern Conference Finals and NBA Finals every year. Without them, they fell off the map. So it's kind of the same. That's why I said I barely put GP over Jason Kidd. And it's only because GP's defense is so much. I just hold it so much higher in regard than Jason Kidd, and GP's offense is just way better than Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd's obviously a better passer. I could even say he's a better floor general. But the overall, I'm going to give it to GP on that. And it's the same for over John Stockton. GP's a better defender. GP's a better scorer. John Stockton was the better shooter, no question. Spotting up, coming off picks. But GP could take him on the block and get a bucket. Easy. And GP could do that all the time with a lot of guys. And GP could also take you off the bounce there and get it. And then he will square up and lock up the best player on the offensive end, like a Michael Jordan, like a Clyde Drexler. And those other guys ain't doing that. So that's why I have GP as my number 5. To me, at this point, get back around here, because that was just my top 5. I wanted to explain it. I'm going to go through it again for those who might have missed it. I got Magic number 1. I have Oscar number 2. Steph number 3. Zeke number 4. Isaiah Thomas. And GP number 5 there. Really quick about Magic, because I was doing some research and looking at the numbers. Magic, man, the win shares. I don't know if you guys know what win shares is. Win shares is it's the amount of contribution that one player had to a team's winning the game. Basically a percentage of it. And generally for Hall of Fame players, 10%, 15% is good. That's Hall of Fame players have that. Jason Kidd has that. John Stockton has that. 15, 16%. Magic is at 23% with win shares per 48 hours, per 48 minutes, which is a full game in the playoffs. And that just kind of just stuck out to me so much, because that just means that Magic really just controlled everything for that team and in the playoffs. Like, so many people love to try to devalue Magic by saying, well, yeah, damn, he played with all these Hall of Famers. But it's like, yeah, is Michael Thompson, is he as great without Magic? Cooper, do you know him without Magic? If he doesn't play in LA, if he plays for fucking, the Dallas Mavericks back then, do you know who Michael Cooper is? Even James Worthy, as great as he was, is James Worthy a Hall of Famer without, Magic Johnson? Or is he like Mark Aguirre, who's just great scorer? Adrian Dantley, great scorers. But they weren't, they're not looked at as regard as like James Worthy is. But a lot of that's because Magic ran that show. And Magic really extended Kareem's prime to make sure that Kareem was still competing for championships in the twilight of his career. Really from about 85 on up to the 90s, Kareem was, he was there, but he damn sure was on that downside. And Magic made sure he still was competing for championships at that level there. So I was just really blown away by that there. But to get to Steph is just, at this point, if you don't think Steph is top 5 point guard of all time, I just don't know what the hell to say to you at this point. I don't know what you watch with basketball. I don't know if you got something personal against him. I don't know if you're still mad at his wife because she said, a basic human need that she just needed, basic human validation like everybody else. Maybe you're mad about that. I don't fucking know. But if you don't understand that Steph Curry is a top 5 point guard all time, and really a top 5 player right now all time, because I was talking with somebody else today where somebody said, is he a top 5 player? I said, of course. I said, of course he's top 5. You can move him any way you want, but he's damn sure top 5. You got Giannis, you got Kawhi, you got KD, you got Braun, you got Steph. Harden is moved out of that top 5. I'm sorry. And I'm a Houston Rockets fan. You guys know from the first episode. I'm a Houston Rockets fan, but Harden is out of that top 5. That shit is over. Steph is submitted, and Steph really been there for me anyway. Harden just had moments where he played so good, I slid him up in there. But Steph is right there. And all time for point guards, I mean, at this point, this guy's a 3-time champ. He's a 2-time MVP, unanimous MVP. I mean, nobody else in the top 5 on me or Nick Wright's list has even won an MVP other than Magic. And maybe Oscar. Let me see. I don't even know if Oscar has won an MVP before. Let me just check that real quick, because that would be really interesting there, that if Magic and Steph are the only ones. Okay, yeah, Oscar won in 64. So Oscar, the top 3. There we go. That basically breaks up your top 3. Magic, Oscar, and Steph. Nobody else has even won an MVP that's in the top 5 there. Of course, Nash got his 2 there, but Nash to me is not in that echelon. And I'm not devaluing Nash's 2 MVPs, and like other people say, oh, Kobe deserved that and Shaq deserves 1. No, Nash deserved those 2 MVPs, but he's still just not on this level there. If he would have got to 1 finals or got to 1 championship, he could maybe have a better conversation and be at that number 5 spot. But, despite all that, this is about Steph right now. But yeah, Steph, 3, like I said, 3 rings, about to be 4, possibly. The 2 MVPs, he just revolutionized the game. And the way that he increases his output during the playoffs is just, you got to admire that. You got to admire that. I don't know what else that you got to say. Like, Steph for his career is only averaging 23.5 points a game, but he ups that to 26 in the playoffs. He ups his rebounds from 4.5 to 5.5 in the playoffs. It's just stayed the same at about 6.5. His shooting percentage, of course, goes down a tick because you're playing better teams. You're playing teams that can strategize against you there. But it's just a tick. He goes from 47 to 45 field goal percentage. And then from 3, he goes from 43 to 41. This guy's shooting 41% from the fucking 3-point line in the playoffs. Like, that is goddamn ridiculous. Like, I remember in the 90s, like, Reggie Miller and all those times that we were looking at 37, 38% shooting from 3. Like, that was just remarkable. Like, they never fucking missed back then. Steph's up here shooting 41 goddamn percent from the 3-point line, 90% from the free throw line. His effective field goal percentage is 56%, which effective field goal percentage takes into account of 3-pointers cost more than 2. So you're more effective as far as putting more points on the board by shooting a certain number of threes there as well. His PER is at 23 a game, which is on par with Magic's, Magic was incredible. He was at 23 a game too there with it. But the one spot where Steph even overtakes Magic slightly with that is usage. Steph's usage is damn near 30. He's at 29% usage there. And what that just means is that the percentage of time that he's on the court, he affects whether there's a bucket or an assist or a rebound. He affects that 30% of the time. And he's playing with another MVP for the last 2 years on the court. And mind you, with that, and that still doesn't take into account how many times he's coming off screen and dragging 2 guys with him, and somebody else gets a wide open layup. They don't have a stat for that yet. So it's just ridiculous, man, how great this guy Steph Curry is, man. Like I said, this is my bias. Excuse my bias. I am being honest with that. He is my second favorite player. But he's my second favorite player because I love impact. I impact guys. Whether it was football and Randy Moss, I always had him over T.O. or anybody else because he was impacting the game. Whether he just ran one route the entire fucking game, he was going to take 2-3 guys with him and leave everybody else open. It's the same with Steph. Whether Steph is shooting good or not, when he comes off that screen, he's taking 2 guys with him. So Draymond has a wide open lane for a layup. Like Draymond, as great as he is, Draymond is not even close to all-star level, probably without Steph. He may be now, like if he was to leave today, he could probably find out now because he's learned so much basketball. He's played so much winning championship basketball. He can go other places and have an idea of how to run an offense. But previously, without playing with Steph, he would have had no idea. He would have been an average guy. He wouldn't have been anywhere near the guy that he is now with playing with Steph. Playing with Steph has helped him increase his output, increase his basketball IQ, increase his productivity so much that now, yeah, if he does go somewhere else, he can be super productive. But without having those years with Steph and Clay, I mean, he'd have been a regular guy. Like I said, Steph Curry is just amazing, man. And if you disagree with that, God bless you. But yeah, that's all we got today, man, for today's podcast. I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for this one. I know this one was a little bit longer than the other ones there, but definitely wanted to give you some good content, especially seeing that we didn't have a game there tonight. So you could take some time, take a good little chill, do a workout or something, listen to some good NBA analysis here. Definitely catch up with us on our next one there. We'll be covering Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals there, and any other breaking news for the NBA, free agency, draft, anything else, trade rumors, things that come up like that. And I'm going to do one when I keep telling you guys, I'm going to do one when I include some boxing in it. I'm just waiting for enough content to come around because, of course, I can cover Deontay Wilder knocking out Brazil, but goddamn, that took, 60 seconds? So what the hell, I'm going to talk about that for 15 minutes for a damn fight with 60 seconds. So, so like I said, I'm waiting for enough boxing shit to come around so I can kind of cover a good 10 to 15 minute segment on it there with it, because the boxing is my second love there with it. But I do want to thank you guys again for checking out today's podcast. This is your boy Jay Crawford, and this is Excuse My Bias, the Bias Sports Podcast Show. The one and only, but not the one and only because we all have biases. We just have different biases. And once again, thank you so much, you guys, for checking in today. Please check out our next one there. Don't forget to follow us on Excuse My Bias Podcast on Instagram, and click and like the Excuse My Bias Facebook page. Help us grow those channels there for us. Drop in any comments or requests there that you have for debates or topics you want me to cover, and I will definitely get to them. Thank you so much again. This is your boy Jay Crawford signing off. Peace.